Canva has over 250 million monthly active users, but when they launched, they didn't try to market to everyone. They obsessed over one tiny audience. That restraint maybe seems counterintuitive because when you're trying to create something super big, it's conventional wisdom to also go super big, but that's a trap. And today I'm breaking down the exact 5 filter framework that Canva used to choose their first audience. When you're creating a new category, you are told to dream big. Investors want a massive total addressable market, and your board wants you to have this hockey stick like adoption curve. So founding teams try to build messaging for as many people as they possibly can. And Canva's CPO, Cameron Adams, described exactly why this fails. When a product is pushed out in the market for everyone, it is impossible for that product messaging to resonate with anyone. Think about trying to write a homepage that resonates with a real estate agent and a YouTube creator and a nonprofit director. You end up speaking to none of them. Going wide doesn't just dilute your audience or your message either. It dilutes your product signals, your feedback loops, and your ability to build the organic advocacy that you need before you can afford to pay for those channels. All right, so if everyone is the wrong answer, how do you find the right first audience for you and your company? Here are the 5 criteria that I derived from analyzing Canva's growth playbook. So let me walk you through each one and how I think you can apply them immediately. Canva's first audience was actually social media managers. That's a surprisingly narrow group of prospective customers when you think about Canva today. So let's use the 5 criteria, which we'll call filters, to uncover why they picked that audience. Filter 1 is feedback velocity. This is about how quickly that first audience can teach you what's working and what isn't with your product or service. Social media managers needed professional quality graphics constantly. Pinterest and Instagram were taking off in 2013 when Canva launched, and the people that were creating that content were making dozens of designs per day. That's a frequency that gave Canva rapid feedback. They could ship a product update on Monday and then be able to iterate on it by Wednesday. This is also why Google's Larry Page has famously called it the toothbrush test. Essentially, is your product something that people use twice a day? Because daily users generate far more data and they help you stress test the edge cases way more than a larger audience logging in once a month. Why it works. 500 daily users will teach you more in a single month than 5,000 users would teach you if they were logging in quarterly. Frequency isn't just a nice to have, it's actually the speed at which you are learning. So how you apply it. Look at your pilot customers or the people on your waiting list or those who you're planning to target. For each audience segment, note how often they use your product and how varied that usage would be. If the audience needs to use your product monthly or less often even, you probably can't learn from them fast enough, and you won't be able to keep them engaged long enough to fuel your growth. Filter 2 is revenue signal. Your first audience needs a clear economic reason to pay for it. Social media managers were a professional user, and they could very quickly realize product return on investment and then justify the expense of it. So many of them worked as a solopreneur or in roles with at least fewer IT gatekeepers that would be blocking purchases than a big enterprise company. Why it works. When a user can draw a direct line between your product and their revenue going up, or maybe their costs going down, you get 2 very important things. You get a willingness to pay and an urgency to adopt. Both of those you are going to need in the early days of your company. So how you apply it. For each audience segment, ask, can they put a dollar value on the problem that you solve? If your audience is solving a nice to have type problem with no budget pressure, well, you will not have the urgency that you need to build a customer base. And hey, free users, they are a great vanity metric for a press release. But if your audience has no economic reason to pay, you are going to struggle to prove unit economics when you need them most down the line. Filter 3 is organic distribution, and I actually think that this one might be the most underrated on the list here. So think about what a social media manager does all day long. They're on social media, they're sharing their work, they're engaging with thousands or millions. There are very few target audiences with a more attractive organic reach than social media managers. And Adams actually noticed that these users loved telling other people about the tools that they were using. So that meant they were a great ambassador to Canva early on. In the early days of a startup, you don't have the marketing dollars that you hopefully will someday. You need your first users to help you spread the word, because that's how you set the foundation for growth. How they did it, Canva didn't need to build some elaborate referral program or ambassador network. Social media managers shared because that's part of their identity. So showing off a great new design tool was content for them as well. Canva's growth became a byproduct of their users doing their jobs and growing as well. So why it works. Superhuman also followed a nearly identical playbook. They launched their email product with a very narrow positioning of founders of high growth tech companies. And, that's a small overall audience, or a very specific overall audience, but founders talk to other founders. The narrow audience had natural paths for organic growth along the way. The best first audiences don't need a referral program to be able to spread the word. They share because it's part of their identity or part of their success. How you apply it. Find the communities where your potential first audiences already gather. So, maybe it's Facebook groups or Slack communities or on Reddit or Discord or industry forums. Are they actively making recommendations to their peers? Or do they see what they do as some sort of a secret sauce that they're hiding from the rest of the world? If your first audience operates in silence, then that means that you will have to manufacture every ounce of awareness on your own. Filter 4 is acquisition costs. Canva found that social media managers gathered in what I would think of as very predictable and affordable places, considering other enterprise prospects. Many subscribed to the same public Facebook groups, they attended the same conferences, and they read the same publications. So no part of Canva's early acquisition strategy required some massive bag of media budget. They knew exactly where to find their target audience. And then they designed every piece of messaging, from the homepage to everything that they published online, to speak directly to that audience. So why it works. Expensive channels have much slower feedback loops. And it's a higher stake for an experiment. When you're spending $50,000 on a conference sponsorship, you need it to work out. There's no wiggle room for experimentation. So posting on a free Facebook group, well, you can test lots of different messages in a week. How you apply this. Find each potential audience, list the 3 ways that you would put your product in front of them. And then I think the contrasts between those audiences should jump off the page. The audience that scores highest on the other 4 filters but requires some massive investment in order to reach them is probably the wrong first audience for you. Filter 5 is market bridge. So after social media managers, Canva expanded to startup founders with very lean teams by adding a presentation feature that was almost exclusively designed for that audience. So that created a yes and opportunity with that first social media audience. It wasn't an abrupt pivot. Tech founders were among the earliest adopters of social media, so they were actually the ones hiring the same social media managers who already used and loved Canva. Why it works. Your first audience ideally has natural connections to several other adjacent audiences that you could see as potential next prospects. So how you apply it. Create a relationship map for your first audiences. Do they naturally influence others outside of their peer groups? Who do they share tools and recommendations with outside of their peer groups? You're looking for at least 2 adjacent audiences that interact with your first audience regularly. Because if you can't draw those immediate lines, you might build a loyal but super isolated user base with no bridge to your next stage of growth. So here's how you use this framework. I would run each of your prospective beachhead audiences through all 5 of these filters. Score them honestly, or at least as honestly as you can, because I think the audience that survives all 5 is probably going to end up being your starting point, even if it feels a little uncomfortably narrow at first sight. Canva's founding team always intended to build a product to serve billions of users, and they're well on their way with over 250 million monthly active users today. But they had the restraint to serve just thousands of users first, and to serve them so well that that small audience became a growth engine for everything that followed. Thanks so much for watching. If you want a full written breakdown with a downloadable scorecard to find your first audience, check out the link to First to Market newsletter in the description. We're publishing a new playbook or framework every week, so please subscribe.